Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We're very grateful to have you all here with us today. I am going to get us started off. So excited for this to be the first day of our presentation, the Financial Aid Webinar Series presented by the Northern California College Promise Coalition and several of our post-secondary partners. May I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. My name is Meredith Curry. I go by Mare, pronouns she, her, and I'm the Executive Director of the Northern California College Promise Coalition. Formed in November 2019, it is a network with a collective impact approach, bringing together leaders, practitioners, and resources to share leadership over college access and success efforts in the region to transform communities. Together, we can change the trajectory for tens of thousands of Northern California students. Collectively, our 32 members serve over 58,000 high school and college students across the 9 Bay Area counties, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Tulare. And we appreciate the leadership and thought partnership of our steering committee, champion and advocate members, and our advisory council. Please learn more about our members on our website. Be sure to check out the other sessions that we have in store for you and register. And please help us promote the Financial Aid Webinar Series to your colleagues and fellow college access and success professionals in your network. We're so grateful for the partnership of the University of California, the Cal State Chancellor's Office, the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office, Immigrants Rising, MoneyThink, and Nadja Jepson. Stay tuned for an announcement about a presentation from the California Independents. It is now my pleasure to introduce this session, Financial Aid Packaging with the UC. And I'm happy to introduce our presenters today, starting with Jamal Collins, Financial Aid Outreach and Communications Liaison for the UC Office of the President. Jamal has 20 years of experience working in financial aid in California and is a product of the public education system in California, attending K-12 schools, community colleges, and transferring to the Cal State system. He held various roles in financial aid at the California community colleges, private, for-profit, and nonprofit colleges, and at the University of California. In his current role as the liaison for UC, he is tasked with educating Californians about the generous financial aid available at the University of California. Welcome, Jamal. Today, we also have Aprí Medina, Associate Director of Student Financial Support. She has nearly 20 years of experience in the University of California system, serving in various roles in financial aid and the Registrar's Office before joining the UC Office of the President in 2021. She began her career as a work-study student in financial aid at UC Santa Barbara and found a passion for issues of access and affordability. Aprí also earned her PhD in higher education from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Excited to have you here with us. Before you all leave today, know that at any point during their presentation, you can type questions right into the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. We also hope you'll complete the exit ticket before you leave. Note that this video is recorded and will be posted to our playlist on the NCCPC YouTube channel. So without further ado, thank you to our speakers for joining us. You now have the floor. Welcome, Aprí.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar on UC Financial Aid. As Mayor mentioned, my name is Aprí Medina. I'm the Associate Director of Student Financial Support at the Office of the President. I am also joined by my co-presenter, Jamal, the Financial Aid Outreach and Communications Liaison, Jamal Collins. So we will plan to accomplish 3 things today with today's session. First, we will provide an overview of UC's financial aid philosophy and how our policies impact our students. Second, we'll dive deeper into UC's financial aid packaging and provide examples of how outside scholarships are incorporated. And finally, we will summarize additional financial support services offered to UC students. Our prepared remarks will last about 30 minutes, so we intend to leave time to answer your questions. And as a reminder, today's sessions is recorded, as Mary mentioned, and this webinar will be available on the Northern California Promise Coalition YouTube channel. So with that, let's dive into UC's financial aid philosophy. The philosophy of the UC Regents on undergraduate financial aid is to maintain affordability of obtaining a UC degree for California residents. We think about financing an undergraduate degree as a partnership between parents, students, and the university. When we talk about a financing partnership, we are thinking about the total cost of attending, which includes tuition and fees, books and supplies, housing and meals, transportation, and other educational expenses. A parent's contribution towards their student's education is based on the information that they provide in the FAFSA or the California Dream Map. Students contribute by borrowing and through part-time work. So the university coordinates both federal and state aid resources, as well as our own UC grant. Our students receive about 400 million federal Pell Grant dollars and about 950 million in state Cal Grant awards. And we provide about 850 million in our own awards through the UC grant program. So to provide some context in the scale, UC students receive over 2.6 billion in grants and scholarships per year, with about 53 million of that being funded by private scholarships. So here are some of the outcomes we're really proud of. 56% of California students do not pay tuition to attend UC due to the financial aid they receive. 71% of California students receive grants and scholarships. And with the average award being about $18,000, many students are receiving enough funding to assist with paying costs beyond tuition and fees. And finally, 46% of California students are also graduating with no student loan debt. So next, I'll pass it on to Jamal to discuss how outside scholarships work with our financial aid packaging. Jamal?
Thank you, Aprí. In the next few slides, we'll walk through the process of how outside scholarships work in conjunction with other aid offered at UC. Financial aid is very complicated and sometimes a confusing subject, but here we've broken it down in a manner that's digestible. So UC's practice is to provide students with the most beneficial package based on that student's eligibility. We also must adhere to federal and state regulations when it comes to awarding and adjusting financial aid packages as new awards and information becomes available. Sorry about that. So there are three questions that we look to answer when we're making adjustments to students' financial aid packages and incorporating outside scholarships. First, we want to look at does the student have financial need? Secondly, we want to look at the cost of attendance and to see if the student has received enough aid to cover their total cost of attendance, which is the cap on the amount of aid that a student can actually receive. And lastly, we look to see if there are any instructions that come with the scholarship that may restrict the scholarship funds to be used in a specific way. In the next slides, we'll look at all of these areas. So first, we'll start with financial need. And UC utilizes the federal methodology, the federal method developed by the US Department of Education to determine a student's financial need. The information the student and the parent provides in their financial aid application results in the expected family contribution, or EFC. And this may be a term you've heard surrounding financial aid. It will actually be changing in the 2023-24 academic year to student aid index, but for these examples, we'll continue using EFC. The EFC is determined, or the EFC is used to determine a student's need and their eligibility for need-based aid, like scholarships, grants, subsidized loans, and work study. So to determine a student's financial need, we take the cost of attendance. In this example, we're using the typical cost of attendance for a student living on campus, which is around $36,700. Then we subtract out the expected family contribution, which again is determined by the FAFSA or the California DREAM Act application. In this example, we're going to use a student with very high need. And this particular student has an EFC of $0. That gives this student a total financial need of $36,700. Next, we look to award the student. And we try to award the student with as much need-based aid as possible, but there are limits to need-based aid. So we start with the gift aid because that's the most beneficial type of aid for students. That's aid that does not have to be paid back. And in this example, and based on our education financing model, the student is eligible for $26,200 in gift aid, and that could come from various sources: Pell Grants, Cal Grants, and UC Grants, or a combination of all three. Once we maximize the student's gift aid, we then move on to see what the student is eligible for in need-based self-help aid, which will include subsidized loans and work study. In this example, the student has been awarded $7,500 in self-help aid, which would be a combination of loans and work. So combined, the student in this example receives $33,700 in need-based aid. Next, we try to determine the student's unmet need. Unmet need is a term used to describe additional need-based aid that a student can be eligible to receive after their initial financial aid award has been offered. So to determine a student's unmet need, we take their financial need, and so this student has a gross need of $36,700, and we subtract out the total need-based aid that the student has been offered, in this case, $33,700, which leaves the student with an unmet need of $3,000. In this case, if the student had received an outside scholarship for $3,000 or less and had not had that unmet need covered by any other aid, then that scholarship would fit in quite nicely with that student's package, and no adjustment to their other need-based aid would be required. If the student received a scholarship exceeding their unmet needs, so over $3,000, then adjustments may have to be made to that student's financial aid package. So here are the three priorities that a financial aid office must take into account when awarding a student an outside scholarship. First, we're going to try to cover that student's unmet need. In this example, that's $3,000. If for some reason the student receives a scholarship exceeding $3,000, then an adjustment will have to be made to that student's, to another part of their aid. And how we prioritize that is we try to put that towards the less beneficial aid offerings. So in that case, that would be like their loans. We try to reduce their loans and work study in this case, in order to fit that scholarship in. in the event that a student received a scholarship that exceeded both their unmet need and their need-based self-help aid, then an adjustment would be required to the gift aid that they were eligible to receive. Next, we're going to look at the cost of attendance and how that plays a role as well. And you'll see a combination of cost of attendance and need in these examples. So here with student one, the student has a 0 EFC, and for purposes of how we look at financial aid, I did take that out and put it in as parent contribution, because typically it's the parents who would be contributing towards the EFC. And that's kind of how we look at it at UC as well. So the parent contribution would be $0 in this case. And these numbers may look familiar because they came straight from the last example. The parent or the student is eligible for gift aid in the amount of $26,200. This number is slightly different. So this student was awarded self-help aid in the amount of $10,500. And if you add those numbers up, that puts the student at their complete cost of attendance. So they've received enough aid to cover their full cost of attendance. So in this case, if the student were to receive an outside scholarship, say $1,000, an adjustment would have to be made in order to keep that student within their cost of attendance, which is the limit to the amount of aid the student is eligible to receive. So with this outside scholarship, the financial aid is now at $37,700 and exceeds the cost of attendance. So we wouldn't reduce the gift aid. However, the self-help aid would have to be reduced to make room for this scholarship. So we reduced that by $1,000 in order to keep the student within the cost of attendance. Now, say for instance, that same exact student received a combination of scholarships that totaled $11,500. In this example, the combination of outside scholarships, $11,500, is more than the self-help, which is $10,500. So their UC gift aid would have to be reduced to keep the student within the cost of attendance. In our next example, we have a student with a bit of a different situation. So they have a parent contribution of $7,000. And we're going to assume that their parents are going to take out a Parent Plus loan in order to cover their contribution of $7,000. They are still eligible for gift aid in the amount of $19,200. And they have a self-help award of $10,500. So they have enough aid to cover their full cost of attendance of $36,700. They receive an outside scholarship of $1,000, an adjustment will have to be made. So the outside scholarship would go toward, or actually exceeds their costs and their financial needs. So an adjustment will have to be made to their subsidized loan in the amount of $1,000 in order to keep that student within the requirements for financial aid. Now, if that same student received an outside scholarship for $11,500, then that, of course, exceeds their self-help aid, which would require us to completely eliminate that piece and also make a reduction to their gift aid in order to keep them within their own financial need, as well as keep them within the cost of attendance. And probably the most common type of scholarship that will require an adjustment would be a restricted scholarship. And with restricted scholarships, a lot of times what happens is the scholarship will come in and it'll have specific instructions to pay a specific part of the cost of attendance. In this example, we see that this student is eligible for a Cal grant, which is restricted by state law to cover tuition. And then they also received an outside scholarship in the amount of $5,000, which was also restricted to cover tuition. In this case, an adjustment would have to be made to the student's Cal Grant if nothing changed within the scholarship. But I recently learned, thanks to Aprí's knowledge, that a lot of our campuses, when they do receive outside scholarships with restrictions like this, they will reach out to the student to try to have that student reach out to the scholarship organization in order to see if there can be an adjustment made to the actual restriction, which of course we're always trying to give the student the most beneficial package as possible. So if the scholarship restriction can be lifted, then in that case, if the student is eligible to receive this money in a different type of way, and it's no longer restricted towards their tuition, then the appropriate adjustments will be made to that student's financial aid package, and a reduction in Cal Grant may not be necessary. So that's it on the scholarship end. Next, we thought it would be really good to just kind of let you guys know about some of the things that are happening at UC, and things that your students may benefit from. So one thing, or the first thing, is our new tuition policy, which is the tuition stability plan. You may have heard about this. And this particular policy, which is going to go into effect as of fall 2022, so this coming fall, it's a multi-year plan that where students can expect their fees to stay the same for up to 6 years, and for each incoming class, the tuition will be set prior to them actually coming in. It isn't, although they should expect their tuition and fees to remain flat throughout a 6-year period, it is not a guarantee, but it's something that they should be able to rely on. So there are certain benefits that this plan provides. For one, as I talked about, tuition certainty, so it reduces the chance of unexpected tuition increases. It also will help the university improve upon the student experience, and it provides more aid resources for the university to help our low-income students. So some of the benefits or some of the enhancements to the student experience will include a plan to ensure that UC is able to continue to enroll the growing population within the state, and reduce class sizes by bringing on more faculty and increasing class offerings, as well as providing additional student support services and upgrading institutional equipment, classrooms, labs, and the like. So another area that we think is really important is basic needs. Meeting basic needs of students and is a multidimensional challenge for communities across the country. Over the last several years, UC has been working to develop new policies, programs, services to meet the university's strategic vision of providing a college experience where all students have what they need to thrive personally and academically. So all 10 UC campuses have on-site basic needs centers providing food, emergency housing, and a comprehensive range of other support services. Any UC student can use services at the Basic Needs Center nearest them, not just on the campus that they're enrolled. The numbers of students who were served in the 2019-20 fiscal year was over 48,000. So the need is definitely there. And the university has the support of the state, which has provided $18.5 million annually for basic needs support. In addition to basic needs support on campuses, the university also understands the need for financial literacy and financial wellness services. So each campus has a financial wellness program that provides support and guidance to students to help them navigate their finances in a way that supports their overall well-being. These programs offer workshops, coaching, and online education aimed at educating students on how to make the best financial decisions and to know who, when, why, and where to ask for help when needed. Here are some resources that are also available for you and your students. So we have the UC Financial Aid website URL here. We also developed 6 videos, and we're in development for one more at this point, specifically on financial aid related topics. The UC Info Center has a wealth of data information as well that's really helpful for students and families when they're making decisions on where to attend, and may be helpful for you as well. You can kind of see how the UC education is providing great outcomes for California students. And then, of course, our basic needs website as well. So to summarize, within the regulations set by the US Department of Education, UC is committed to providing students with the most beneficial financial aid package available. The university is also dedicated to providing predictability when it comes to costs and improving the student education experience. Student basic needs is an area of importance at UC, and the UC is committed to working to eliminate food and housing insecurity. And the university understands the need for financial education and has offered students services to support that need. And with that, I think we're right at 30 minutes in. So if we have any questions, that'd be great.
Great presentation. Thank you so much for that, Jamal. Really appreciate it. And I will defer to you both to take the questions in whichever order, whoever wants to take it. So one of the questions that was posted, when you say that you try to prioritize reducing, canceling the loans and work study prior to gift aid, what would be an example of a situation where the student's gift aid was reduced or canceled prior to work study or loans? And I'll retype that into the chat if that's helpful.
That's a great question. I think the example that Jamal shared of when a scholarship has restrictions, that would be an example where gift aid might have to be reduced. But again, our campuses, the financial aid offices in particular, do a great job of reaching out to the student because we always want to maximize the student's benefits. And so we usually encourage in that situation the student to reach out to the organization, again, as Jamal mentioned, to either remove the restrictions or maybe preserve the award for a term where maybe the student won't qualify for certain gift aid, perhaps summer session where there's limited gift aid. So, you know, we tried to work with the student and get them to connect with the organization. But that would be one of the few examples that I could think of. Jamal, do you have any other examples?
I think that would be pretty much it that I can think of. The only other thing that I was thinking about is if a student is bumping up against their need. But in that case, we would try to reduce I would think we'd want to reduce their if we can, their need-based loan or need-based self-help aid first before going towards their gift aid.
Yes, yeah, that's usually priority, is to reduce the student's loan burden. I will also note that sometimes students have higher educational costs. So if the terms of the scholarship come in kind of referencing that this is intended for students purchasing of a computer or something, again, a financial aid officer might reach out to the student to see if there's an opportunity to do an appeal to increase their cost of attendance that Jamal spoke about, to make room for that so that we don't have to reduce or adjust any type of financial aid, because sometimes a student's aid has been maximized, including the student loans. They've accepted every piece of aid that they have with the intention that they need it. And so, occasionally students will need to go ahead and increase their cost of attendance, and that's usually done through an appeal. But again, a financial aid officer typically reaches out. And if not, a student can always connect with the financial aid office to explain that, they might have higher costs.
That is super helpful. Thank you so much. And just to reconfirm, so it'll be the financial aid officers at the student's campus. Do you have a sense of when they may reach out for that information to support their students and kind of advocating for either, the change in the restriction or whatnot, like when that might happen in their cycle with you?
Every campus is a little bit different, but typically, campuses are not processing scholarships until a student has decided to enroll. So usually that's like sometime in the middle of the summer, if not bumping up right against the fall term of enrollment, because there's a lot of activity happening in the summer in financial aid offices, typically to do with the original packaging of financial aid. So often offices are consumed with that, but they will take an eye to scholarships, typically middle summer, late summer, and start reaching out at that time. And then again, it also depends on when the checks are received. So if an agency sends it later in a term, then until the aid office can actually see it and see how it's going to affect the aid, that's at that point they'll reach out to the student.
Super helpful. Thank you so much. Okay, going back to the questions in the chat. One question that was posed is, can we get a copy of this deck? And I can answer that one. So you will get a copy of the deck, which includes that last slide where you might have seen some of those resources Jamal mentioned. We'll be sure you get a copy of that. There was also a question that came in. What is the timeline for students to receive their financial aid packages? And this kind of piggybacks off your most recent response. And if it doesn't arrive before May 1, how do you suggest counselors advise students to make a decision?
Yeah, sorry, you went on mute. Would you like to?
I'll go ahead.
So yes, every UC campus has different timelines in terms of production of what we call conditional aid offers. So if you're talking about new students who are trying to make the May 1 decision on which campus to attend, typically the reason a student doesn't receive a conditional aid offer from a campus is there's some sort of data missing or data mismatch. So for example, a campus needs to be able to match a FAFSA to the student's admissions application. And sometimes the student chooses not to put their social security number on an admissions application. And that might result in the financial aid office not being able to produce a conditional aid offer. So what I would suggest is they haven't received anything within, usually it's like 2 to 3 weeks after they've been admitted. Typically campuses try to time them at the same time. If you get an admissions offer, you're typically getting a conditional aid offer at the same time. But if they don't see anything within like a couple weeks after their admissions decision, I would encourage them to reach out to the financial aid office, because it may be that it's a fix that they can supply the admissions office so that their applications can link. That's the number one most common reason a student wouldn't receive one, or a student believes they filled out the financial aid application for the next academic year, but when in reality they probably filled it out for a prior year. So I also usually encourage students to go back and look at the academic year of the application that they completed, because sometimes there's with multiple, now with prior year, the FAFSA being available earlier in October, it can be confusing on which year you complete. So we usually, want to encourage students to make sure that they've completed the correct application for the academic year in which they're going to enroll. Any other thoughts, Jamal?
Well, also just ensuring that they have listed the school on the FAFSA as well. I know that, you know, students are applying to multiple schools. They're limited to 10 choices on a transaction, but, you know, being able to go back in and making sure that they have the school ID number on that FAFSA transaction.
And usually they can remove them. Like if they've got a conditional aid offer from one campus, they can go ahead and remove that school and add someone else. Sometimes, you know, it's not quite common, but there are occasions where students get into every single college they apply to, and it's over 10. As long as they've gotten, again, that initial conditional aid offer, they can take that school off, put in the other one so that the other school can get the transmission of the data. Because the school only needs the data once in order to create a conditional aid offer. So at least they can be able to compare. And then once they start to kind of winnow down or narrow down their options of the schools that they're considering, then they can go ahead and take off those schools that they're not, you know, not even considering going to, and make sure that the ones that they're still, you know, debating before May 1 are listed on their application. But also a reminder, every time they make an adjustment on their application, they do have to sign again. And so digital signature when they log in with their FAFSA, it's not a PIN anymore, the login password, user ID and password. And then for the parents also have to digitally sign again.
Thank you for that information. And I am trying to capture some kind of high level notes. So for folks who are jotting down notes super fast, I'll make sure that there's some of this in the transcript of the video. There's a kind of a two-part question. So I leave it up to you when you want to break it down. But part one, what % of UC gift aid is merit-based versus need-based? If you could speak to that. And then part two is that if a student receives merit gift aid from UC, then their internal and external scholarships can cover their full cost of attendance instead of just financial need, is the question. And I'll post both questions again in the chat.
I keep muting myself instead of unmuting. So I could probably speak towards the first part of that question. I would say the overwhelming majority of grant and aid that's provided by or funded by UC is need-based. And so a much smaller portion of that would be the merit piece. And there are some types of aid that are both. So they may have both a merit and a need component. But as far as and I'm the second part of that question, I'm wondering is it that the student has not applied for financial aid, so we don't know what their need is, but they received merit scholarships? Is that kind of the question?
And if it's helpful to unmute and respond, that works too, Naja.
Hi, thank you so much. This presentation is so helpful and great. So I'm a scholarship provider, and we kind of encounter this every year with students and about how much money they should try and get. We work with low income and first generation students. And so the question about the need-based versus merit is if they have a situation where they have a higher EFC than they feel like they are able to cover, we want them to know if it's only going to be their financial need versus their full cost of attendance that could be covered. And so my understanding is that if they were getting merit-based scholarships from the university, as long as their other outside scholarships didn't exceed the cost of attendance, then they could have money to cover all of that, including their EFC. But that if it was need-based funding from the university, it could only cover their financial need.
I see. So that is actually a common misconception. So the way we think about merit versus need, that only has to do with selection on scholarship. So the scholarship conditions, right? So even if UC had a merit-based, like our Regent Scholarship, for example, how we select the student is purely merit-based. But because the flavor of the money is gift, it still applies against the financial need ceiling that Jamal was talking about earlier in the presentation. So everything has to meet that financial need ceiling. We cannot cover EFC with, we can't cover EFC with anything other than non-need-based aid, which would be unsubsidized loan or parent loan or private loan if a student or family chose to borrow a private loan. unfortunately. But it does depend, because a student who has, like in your example, a much higher EFC, they may not have gift aid at all. They might have like a partial subsidized loan, and for them, it will stand, even though we'll have to cancel out the subsidized loan and eat into their non-need-based aid, which would be other non-need-based loans. In their situation, it may not matter as much because they didn't have any gift aid to start. But for a student who has gift aid, yeah, we do have to work within that need ceiling as well as the cost of attendance ceiling. So we have to work with both, no matter whether, again, the scholarship is merit-based or need-based. Good question.
Yes, thank you. Great question. And I don't see any more in the chat. So let's just give it another minute to see if any of those great questions and answers inspire others from our audience today. While we're waiting for some more questions, is there any other insights or pearls that those questions inspired Jamal and Aprí to share while we wait? Any updates to where students can find scholarships for their specific campuses, or any insights about that? Because I know there tend to be scholarships available right through the UC.
Yeah, and we are the University of California. We are a system, but I will say that every campus is very unique in the types of scholarships they can provide. So in some campuses, all scholarships are centralized through the financial aid office. Many campuses, they're decentralized, meaning the academic units control a lot of the scholarship portfolio on a campus. So usually what I encourage students to do is first check with financial aid, because the particular campus you're dealing with everything that you can apply for goes through or be considered for. Sometimes you don't need to apply at all. It's all done through your UC admissions application. It's all considered through the financial aid office. At other campuses, for example, Santa Cruz, I was most recently at, very much the students needed to visit the academic divisions and their departments. So sometimes it was a matter of, like for transfer students, they knew exactly which major department they were going to go into and be admitted to. So I would encourage them to visit their websites because those departments, and sometimes again, academic divisions, have their own scholarship pages, and they will list the requirements of each of those scholarships. And that's something that students could get a head start on before they even step foot on the campus. So that's something that they can be proactive about in the beginning. But again, it is going to vary campus by campus. So those are some good first steps to start inquiring and researching.
And I would definitely, just to add to that, recommend that students, a lot of times I speak to students and they think this is just a process for before they actually get into college. But they're going to be applying for financial aid each year. So they should also be looking for scholarships each year that they're in school as well, because there may be continuing student scholarship opportunities also available to them.
That is super helpful. So great insights. One, ensure our students are checking in with their financial aid office in case there's a decentralized approach. Two, students should probably still check with their academic departments, just in case, depending on their approach. But then third, students should be looking into these opportunities proactively, as well as even after they enroll each year. Does that sound right?
Yes. And another great tip that I received a scholarship when I was going into college from my parents' employer. My parent worked for an agricultural company, and they wound up having a scholarship that no one ever knew about because, well, they're a small, family little company, so they didn't have promotional materials. They weren't trying to advertise widely. It was really intended for their employees. So sometimes just looking locally is a large benefit, because the ones online, it's really difficult to distinguish between what's plentiful in terms of scholarships from your organization and what's like 1 in 1,000, right? So, but I usually encourage also students to look locally, check your credit union, check, your local credit union, check your parents' employers. Like those are really great places to start. If your grandparents are still working, their employers, like you never know who might have funding available. But yeah, starting locally as well is really strong. It reaps a lot of benefits too.
That's great to know. And as a grateful UC alum myself, is there any benefits to students connecting with like the UC alumni programming or anything like that as they make their decisions or explore scholarships?
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great idea. UC alumni, I'm not sure of, again, they're very diverse. Every campus has their own alumni association that offers different types of scholarships, but it might be worth inquiring because some may have that they provide for the children of UC alumni. So yeah, that's a great place to start as well.
Yeah, so I still haven't seen any questions, so we'll leave it open a few more minutes. Anything else that you might want to share with folks about the UC Office of the President, about any of the individual campuses, any upcoming events to be aware of, anything like that?
Well, one of the things we talked about, Mara, when we met was the UC appeal process and the use of Swift. And just wanted to let folks know that we actually don't use Swift at UC. Each of our campuses has their own process for accepting appeals and the documentation that they need for those appeals. So we definitely recommend that students reach out to their financial aid office to find out what the process is for their specific campus.
And many of the campuses will have the appeals process posted on their websites. So if students visit the financial aid websites, they usually can find the step-by-step instructions for how that campus operates in terms of accepting appeals for both incoming students and continuing students.
That's great. Thank you for that. We did have another question come in. Love the outside scholarship slides with the scholarship displacement scenarios. Is this available on any of the UC websites for students? Especially since I think this deck will be shared primarily to those who registered for this event, but they're not student facing.
Again, every financial aid office has their own websites where they host how they, some of them will directly explain how they package financial aid and how it affects, but that's a great question. I'm not sure centrally, I'm newer this past year. Jamal, do we have a central space on the UC Apply website where this information might be?
We actually don't. Most of our materials in our website is geared towards prospective students and kind of really highlights UC financial aid. So we don't have anything that specifically calls out financial aid adjustments for scholarships or outside scholarships.
But as we're developing our outreach materials, we'll definitely take this feedback because I think that's a great idea actually to maybe incorporate that into some system-wide videos that we create. So thank you for the question. It's sparking an idea.
Yay, that's what this is for. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for considering that and taking that internally. And just want to echo some of the love being shared. So if folks don't have questions, please take this opportunity to send thanks and show your love for the UC Office of the President, walking us through financial aid packaging, opening the curtain and letting us see what's going on behind the back door. If you want to also provide feedback and let our presenters know today, huge thanks to Jamal and Aprí, how well they did today. Please complete our exit ticket. That's the best place to both let them know how it went and to let us know how we can improve on it in the future. So huge thanks again to Jamal and Aprí for preparing this great presentation for everyone. I just want to say also one more, something is not updated, but just one more thank you to our members, especially our Communities of Practice Committee, whose idea it was to start this financial aid webinar series. And in case I didn't say it earlier, UC Office of the President has been our closest partner in this and was the first to present on this topic last year. So give them some more snaps and love in the chat for that. After today, again, this will be recorded. We'll share the link with you since we have your email. Please check out our other upcoming sessions. If you want to learn more about looking at the different financial aid packages, our presentation this Thursday by MoneyThink will be on supporting students navigating college enrollment decisions. Just again, a huge thank you to our partners and supporters. A huge thank you to the UC Office of the President. We'll send a copy of this deck as a follow-up. We do have until 2 o'clock. So I think for those of you who might want to stay on and you might want to ask your questions in a more intimate setting, feel free to do that. Otherwise, thank you all so much again, and please complete the financial aid series ticket before y'all jump off. And with that, just thank you again, Aprí and Jamal. If you don't mind, let's stay just a few more minutes and see if anyone wants to hang out. Thanks, everyone.